Johnny Carson revealed the 9 Golden Age guests who were actually evil. For 30 years, Johnny Carson brought America's biggest stars into living rooms across the country. His warm smile and easy laugh made viewers feel like they were watching old friends catch up over coffee. But when the cameras stopped rolling and the audience went home, Carson's smile often disappeared. According to those closest to him, America's favorite host kept a mental blacklist of guests he considered truly terrible human beings. Johnny was the ultimate professional on camera, revealed a former Tonight Show producer who worked with Carson for over a decade. But the minute we cut to commercial, he would sometimes turn to Ed and whisper, "That person should never be near a camera or a child." In his final years, Carson became increasingly candid about the celebrities he'd secretly despised throughout his career. The stories he told close friends paint a disturbing picture of beloved icons who were monsters behind their carefully crafted public images. Most shocking were Carson's revelations about one legendary actress who appeared sweet and vulnerable on his couch, but backstage had verbally assaulted a young production assistant so viciously that security had to intervene. And the beloved male star, who Carson caught doing something so disturbing in his dressing room that the host nearly called the police. These weren't just difficult personalities or demanding stars. According to Carson, these were genuinely dark people hiding behind fame and talent. Predators, abusers, and manipulators who the industry protected for decades. But first, we need to understand why the first name on Carson's list earned his most intense dislike, in a private backstage confrontation no one has ever revealed until now. Well, first of all, I'm stage struck, and I think they all know that. Secondly, I try to get a film that has audience identification. Joan Crawford, the Hollywood queen with ice in her veins. When Joan Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, viewers saw the gracious Hollywood legend they'd admired for decades. With her perfect posture, immaculate appearance, and practiced charm, Crawford embodied old Hollywood glamour. But according to multiple Tonight Show staff members, Crawford's off-camera behavior revealed a very different person. She was one of the coldest people I've ever interviewed, Carson reportedly told his biographer years later. Like talking to a beautiful statue with nothing inside. Crawford's appearance began causing problems before she even arrived at the studio. Her demands included specific lighting requirements, so detailed that the show's technical director still had the 4-page memo in his files decades later. Everything had to be precise, recalled a former producer. The angle of her chair, the height of Johnny's desk, even the temperature of the studio, exactly 67 degrees, not 66, not 68. When Crawford finally arrived 3 hours before taping, she brought her own makeup team, despite the show having award-winning makeup artists on staff. But what truly revealed Crawford's character was how differently she treated people based on their importance. She practically curtsied to Johnny, said a stagehand who was present that day. But when a young production assistant accidentally entered her dressing room with water she had requested, Crawford exploded. According to multiple witnesses, Crawford launched into a tirade so vicious that staff members in the hallway froze in shock. She allegedly called the assistant, a 20-year-old woman just starting in the industry, a brainless little underscore, and suggested she find work at a brothel where incompetence might be an asset. The young woman fled in tears, and Crawford demanded she be fired. Carson's producer refused, creating tension that lasted throughout the taping. But the most disturbing aspect of Crawford's appearance wasn't just her treatment of staff. It was the calculating way she transformed the moment cameras turned on. She was like a machine pretending to be a woman, one producer recalled. She had rehearsed every answer, every laugh, every spontaneous moment. Nothing was real. During commercial breaks, Crawford would immediately drop her smile and sit in stone-faced silence, not speaking to anyone, then instantly reanimate when the red light came back on. Carson, who made his living off making his guests comfortable, struggled to find any authentic connection with Crawford. After the show, he reportedly told Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses with more personality." Years later, when Christina Crawford's memoir, Mommy Dearest, exposed Joan's alleged abuse of her adopted children, Carson wasn't surprised. According to close friends, he simply nodded and said, "I saw who she really was in those few hours. I believe every word." But if Crawford's cold calculation unnerved Carson, his next nemesis represented something he found even more disturbing: raw power used to intimidate and threat. I can answer that by telling you that in those lovely moments, I played Daphne and Chloe, or the Frank Sinatra, the charming bully Carson couldn't stand. On screen, Frank Sinatra and Johnny Carson appeared to share a cordial, even friendly relationship. The legendary singer would joke, tell stories, and occasionally perform, while Carson played the respectful host. Behind the scenes, however, Carson reportedly harbored a deep dislike for Sinatra, not for his talent, which Carson respected, but for how Old Blue Eyes treated people when he thought no one important was watching. If he didn't sing, he'd be a mob enforcer, Carson once told a friend, according to multiple biographies. And sometimes I think he was both. Sinatra's appearances on The Tonight Show were notorious among crew members for the tension they created. According to longtime staff, Sinatra would arrive with an entourage of up to 8 men who were described as not show business types, more like guys you wouldn't want to meet in an alley. These men would spread through the studio watching staff and creating an atmosphere one cameraman described as like being under surveillance. But what truly disturbed Carson was witnessing how Sinatra treated people he deemed beneath him. During one appearance in the early 1970s, a floor manager made the mistake of giving Sinatra the standard 3 minutes warning before his segment. According to several witnesses, Sinatra grabbed the man by his tie and pulled him close, saying, "Nobody tells me when I've got 3 minutes. I'll go on when I'm ready." The floor manager, a Korean War veteran in his 50s, was visibly shaken afterward. When Carson saw this interaction from his office monitor, he nearly canceled the segment. Only the producers' reminder of the ratings Sinatra would bring convinced him to continue. Another source of tension was Sinatra's reliability, or lack thereof. He allegedly canceled appearances last minute multiple times, including once just 2 hours before taping when he was already in the building, but decided he wasn't in the mood. The most revealing moment came during a commercial break when Sinatra made a disparaging comment about a female staff member's appearance, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Carson, breaking his usual professional detachment, coldly responded, "We don't talk about my staff that way here." The tension was palpable, with Sinatra visibly surprised that anyone, even Johnny Carson, would challenge him. When the cameras returned, both men maintained their professional facades, but crew members noticed Carson's questions became notably shorter and less engaged. After that appearance, Carson reportedly told his producer, "I don't care what his ratings are. Limit him to once a year maximum." What makes this particularly significant is that Carson rarely involved himself in booking decisions and almost never banned guests outright. For him to restrict Sinatra's appearances spoke volumes about his personal distaste for the singer's behavior. While Sinatra represented the bullying side of celebrity power, Carson's next problematic guest demonstrated a different kind of difficult, the overwhelming ego that recognized no boundaries or formats. Now, the argument against what I'm saying is that the world is full. All the best young directors are soaked. Orson Welles, the genius who thought rules were beneath him. Orson Welles appeared on The Tonight Show multiple times during the Carson era, always generating memorable television with his booming voice, larger-than-life presence, and remarkable stories from his storied career. Viewers at home saw a charming, brilliant racer. Carson and his staff saw something else. A man whose ego had grown so enormous that he believed normal rules of television simply didn't apply to him. "Never again," Carson reportedly said after one particularly difficult Welles appearance. "That guy thinks he's still running Rome." The problems typically began before Welles even arrived at the studio. According to Tonight Show writers, Welles routinely dismissed any prepared questions or topics Carson's team had developed. "He told us our questions were pedestrian and obvious," one former writer recalled. "He literally crossed them all out and handed back an empty page." This put Carson in the uncomfortable position of having to interview one of cinema's most significant figures with no preparation or framework. This was a particular challenge given Wells's tendency to launch into lengthy, meandering stories that were difficult to edit for time. During one appearance in the mid-1970s, Wells was scheduled for a 7-minute segment. He stayed on the couch for nearly 25 minutes, ignoring multiple subtle cues from Carson that it was time to wrap up. Johnny had a series of signals he would give guests when time was running short, a director explained. Wells saw them all and just kept talking. We had to bump to other guests entirely. Wells's behavior towards staff was equally dismissive. He reportedly refused to speak directly to production assistants, instead addressing them in the third person, even when they were standing right beside him. Tell the girl I need more water, or ask the boy to adjust the light. What particularly irritated Carson, according to those who knew him well, was Wells's habit of treating The Tonight Show as if it were his own personal platform rather than Carson's program. Orson would bring props, change topics without warning, and even attempt to direct camera shots from his seat. A former producer explained, he once actually stood up and tried to tell our camera operators which angles to use. Johnny was livid. After one particularly challenging appearance, Carson reportedly told Ed McMahon, "Genius doesn't excuse everything. Being brilliant doesn't give you the right to hijack someone else's show." Carson, himself a perfectionist about television production, found Wells's disregard for the medium's constraints to be especially galling. Though he kept the public respect for Wells's immense contributions to film, in private he started considering him as the cautionary tale of what happens when talent is eclipsed by ego. While Wells represented the challenge of containing an oversized personality, Carson's next difficult guest brought a different problem. Unpredictable behavior that could quickly turn hostile spelled out in light bulbs. Besides some